Hello and welcome back. So in this lesson, what I want to do is to begin adding some rules to this state machine that we've created here in our animator, and to really kind of govern how you're allowed to get from one of these states to the next. So what we've done so far is created the transitions, or the pathways into and out of these various states, but we haven't said under what conditions we're allowed to do that. So that's what we're going to do in this lesson, and I'm going to do it with parameters, which I can add to this system here. So first of all, though, if we just take a quick look back here at our root, just a note on what's happening here. This is my Sapper object here, the root of my hierarchy for this character. As we saw in the last lesson, has an animator component, and there's a public field in that called controller, which is looking for a file, and that file is represented by what you can see in this animator window. So if we click on that here, you can see that there's Sapper, which was the controller file. If I zoom in there, you'll see it's always represented by this little flowchart icon. So that is always created by the converter with the same name as the prefab. So I've got Sapper 15 here just to match the begin 15 scene that we're working on. But really, you only need to have one controller file for this character. I'm going to be just versioning it along with the lessons. But what I'm going to do here is just set rules for how I can get from one of these states to the next. So we start off here with idle stand. So we did set one rule in the last lesson as we were creating this layout here by right clicking on idle stand instead of walk, which I think was the default, and we can say set as the layer's default state, which is what it is now because it's in orange. Right? So that tells us that that's the default state. So when we start playing this system, it'll play through this in order, right? So what it'll do is, it'll play, start playing idle, and then it'll crouch, and then it'll walk, and then it'll play the first way out of walk that it can find, which is to take us back to idle stand, and crouch, and then walk, and it'll never get to run. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to set some rules now that will allow us to play all of these animations under the correct conditions. So I'm going to do that with parameters. Okay, so up here to the side, the left side of our animator window, we've got this parameters window here, and we can it's on a tab, so we can add parameters, which are really just ways that we can set conditions for getting through these transitions here. So we can create floats and ints, right? So they're numeric transitions or numeric parameters. Floats being decimal numbers, ints being integers or whole numbers. Bools being Boolean values, they're true or false, and we can set them to be true or set them to be false, and read whether they are true or false as well. And triggers are another type of Boolean, but they immediately set themselves to being false once we set them true. So they default to being false. If you just use the trigger, it's true for one frame and then it's false again. So think bool is like a light switch. You either turn it on or you turn it off. Trigger is more like a button with a spring in it, so it's on for a second and then it's off by itself. So what we're going to do here is just make a bool, right? So a new bool, we'll call it walk pressed, or let's be more accurate and call it move pressed. Okay, so if we've pressed a button that we want to use to start moving, just going to press enter there, then that would trigger our walk animation or our run animation, but not our idle animation, right? So it's either going to be on or off, right? When it's off, that's when we go to like skid and idle and those things. When it's on, we walk or we run. So what we need to do here is first of all say, you know, how do we get from idle stand to walk? Okay, so if we click on the transition, right, the arrow itself, right, rather than the states, the arrows will for these transitions will tell us much more. So um, if you look down here, you get this little preview window, but it's in 3D, and you might notice that your Z order uh, gets a bit messed up in this view, but not to worry, you can preview animations anyway. And so we just can play that, and that shows us transitioning with a very smooth blend from idle to walk. If we wanted to increase the length of time for that blend, we can just widen this value here, and it just takes longer to ease in. So this is the length of time that from within our idle stand animation that we will begin to transition out of it and into walking. So this is currently defaulted to having an exit time. So the exit time is what allows us to leave that animation and get into our walk. But I'm going to turn that off and set a different condition. So if we go down here, we get a warning. It says the transition needs at least one condition, right? So or an exit time. So exit time is the default condition for leaving a state, right? So that's what we've had so far. That's what was just allowing us to play each of these once and get out of them, play the next one, the next one, the next one. So what we want to do is create our own conditions here, and we control that with these parameters. So we've created one parameter here. I'm just going to add one here, and because it's the only one we've created, it presumes that you want to change its value. So it presumes that the condition, if we had more, they'd appear in this drop-down list, but we've only got one so far, move pressed, and it's true. So it assumes that if we set this to be true, we want to switch from standing to walking. And likewise, how do we get back? Well, it wouldn't just time out. It would presume that again, we would press our button, but it would be, or we would release our button, and it would now set this parameter to be false. So we're going to have to write a script that that binds this parameter to a button press of some kind. So we'll do that. We'll do that later on. But for the moment, let's just start setting this. In fact, we can simulate pretty much most of this without writing any code. We can just start messing with these values here. But okay, so how do we get from standing to crouching? Well, let's say we wanted her to stand for 2 animation cycles and then crouch. We could just drag, instead of widening this band like this, we can just drag the whole thing by just clicking on that blue patch in the middle and say that she stands for 2.5 animations or 2.5 cycles of the stand animation, and then she'll crouch. And likewise, to get out of crouching to walking, that doesn't happen automatically. If you just leave exit time, it's automatic. What we're going to say is that that's again a button press. So we actually can control all of this with just one button press. So we assume that, like, if the player starts pressing a button, that we want to walk. And then to get from walk to run, we could say that yes. So you have to be in move mode, but we could say that she takes two walking steps and then starts to run. But you can see here that this walk cycle is not looping, right? So I'm gonna just click down here on my walk file here, and just whatever happened to it, it didn't loop. So that must have been something that came from Spriter. But I'm just going to say loop that time there, and then it'll walk. So if we go back to our transition now, we get to loop this. So let's say she takes 2 steps and then she runs, like that. So and so that happens when it both times out after 2 cycles, and we have to have pressed the button as well. And run just it doesn't have an exit time, but it does happen if we've been running, and skidding happens if we've been running and we release the button, and we can transition from skid back to idle at the very end of our skid. So I'm going to just wind that down to almost completely play that animation, and then we transition into idle. So we can get a preview of that, right? So she'll skid and then she'll transition like that. Maybe give it a little bit of a blend. Okay, so because these are transform animations, Unity does a really good job of blending those transitions. So let's just have a quick test of that now. So this doesn't immediately go anywhere until it's played through twice. Then she'll crouch, and she'll stay like that until this condition is met. So now she'll start walking. And having taken a couple of steps, she'll continue to run until we stop pressing our button. Then she'll skid and then go back to idle. Okay, so what we've done in this lesson now is just created some rules for how our character can get from one animation state to the next. So next we want to start binding that to some proper player controls. Okay, so we'll see you in the next lesson.